Greetings, parish orphans and retrogrades. Timothy Gordon here with a special treat. My wife, Stephanie.
Howdy.
And we are coming to you today with the topic, what's it like to be a faithful Catholic teacher in an unfaithful Catholic school? It's the plight of any faithful Catholic teacher in unfaithful Catholic schools around the nation. I got a wife's perspective because I lived it for many, many years. I've taught for 10 years. And I just thought you guys love to hear from Steph anyway. So what's up? We got a list for you. And this list of about 10 items, a little more, is comprehensive in the sense that it's both particular and general to my situation and others. So we're just going to run through these. You might not even know, as the bill-paying parent, that this is happening at your school. I can almost guarantee it is.
Hey, yeah. We also wanted to give a little update on how our family is doing since our move to Mississippi and from the events of the summer. A lot of you already know that Tim lost his job at a diocesan school for criticizing the BLM. And so, yeah, we've just had a kind of a wild ride the last few months.
Very wild, Steph. Yeah, so the classes start tomorrow for church history and Aristotle's ethics. They're both almost full. A few spots left. If you want to get in on that, get in while the getting's good, which is still now. It's any time prior to about this time of the day tomorrow. And you can go to timothyjgordon.com and click enroll. Literally, I think less than 10 spaces in one of them and near 10 spaces in the other one.
And we record all of them. So, I think we had orientation already, and then Catholic Republic had one class, but each class has an exclusive class playlist. So if you miss a class, or you have other activities going on during the week and you can't make every single one of them, we record them all. So you won't be too far behind even if you enroll now. But that's a new thing for us. We when Tim lost his job at Garces, we were kind of throwing this idea around for a few years before that. Like, you should really try to transition into some online teaching. But between the podcasting and writing books, spending lots of time with the family, there just really wasn't much time to develop the idea. So we're really happy that we were able to finally do that. And we've been really, really happy with how it's been turning out. And the students have been really great. And so, yeah, we're about to go full steam.
One thing that's funny to do to people who are new behind the microphone are fake them, give them a head fake like you're going to say something, and then let the silence just ring out, because the silence is terrifying, right?
Just feel like I have to keep talking.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to make you do. Yeah, I just to be fun. So anyway, Steph's becoming a pro though. As you know, she's a big time homeschooler, and well, you offer the contrasting perspective, Stephanie Gordon, of longtime champion homeschooling mother who was doing this by day when I would go under the same auspices, teacher, to teach at Garces Memorial High School, which many of you now know this ignominious name through none other than yours truly, because I was fired on June 3rd for simply calling domestic terror what it is. The Black Lives Matter organization is an anti-Christian, professedly Marxist organization who fired me. I know you've already heard this whole story, but what we're giving you today is a 30,000-foot flyover, a perspective on Catholic education from an exiled Catholic high school teacher who the school had formerly been really, really appreciative to have. And you always saw me coming home. I liked the job because it's so much better than being an attorney or being an oil and gas landman, and because so many of the students were cool. But what's the overall sentiment, Stephanie, whatever your middle name is, Gordon, on what Stephanie C. Gordon, on how it was to be the spouse, who also homeschooled, of a guy that was trying to be a faithful Catholic, going and teaching with the system working against me.
Yeah, this is kind of like a tell-all book, but about Catholic education. The insider's point of view. What's funny about this is that for years, people, since we were kind of involved in this school's, social life, I guess, so to speak, we would go to a lot of their events and games and so. I would talk to a lot of the parents there and some of the other teachers, and they would always ask me, well, why don't you have your kids in any of the parochial schools? Your husband teaches at a Catholic school. Why don't you have any of your guys' 6 kids in the school? And the list we're about to give you is precisely why. Because we know how these things typically run. I mean, again, like if you have like this magical unicorn of a school that does, you know, the faith properly, then obviously this doesn't apply to you. But let's face it, most diocesan schools aren't that way. I think a lot of the things that the perspectives that we have and the criticisms that we have of this school and a lot of the schools in the area basically apply to a lot of them. All of you out there who might even work for, you know, diocesan schools, please comment below if you notice some of these things as well, or if you notice things on our list that we haven't really gotten to.
So item number 1. I'm not going in ontological importance, that is to say, order of importance to Catholic education. I'm going in order of notability or prominence. And if you set foot on most Catholic high schools' campuses, what you'll notice is the skirts, or I'm kind of giggling here, the skirts, which are an attractive look, shall we say, for, you know, playful husbands and wives everywhere, all around the country, all around the world.
Halloween costumery.
Yeah, Halloween costumery. Well, there's a funny story about that. They aren't supposed to befit the students in such a way as to be an attraction. A Catholic school uniform is supposed to be a drag, right? What's the number one thing you notice and elderly relatives noticed and parents-in-law notice and our girls?
Passerbys on the streets and other schools. Yeah, okay, so this is the thing. It might seem trite to you, the skirt length for these Catholic schools, but honestly, it's a really good marker, I think, for if you're at a good school. If your girl's skirt is below her knee, that's a good sign.
It's good.
The contrary is what we were dealing with. And, you know, my husband's in the THEO department, and is trying to really beef up this school's theology and really get the kids on fire for the faith. And so we felt it as an obligation when they would have holy days of obligation that we would come to school as a family, and we would go to Mass with Tim, and I would want to bring my girls there to see their dad at school and at Mass. So we started doing this quite often. I had to stop doing that because of these skirts. Now, you might think that's silly, but I am not exaggerating you. I would go there and I would literally see, like, when a girl was in a full standed position, the bottom of her bottom, the bottom of her bottom, quite literally.
Double bottom. Yeah, the bottom of the bottom.
A double bottom. And I'm not a prude, but I mean, I do have, you know, young children with me, and on many occasions my young daughters, who we do make sure, you know, even when they're little, their skirt lengths are appropriate. We would go to Mass, and these teenage girls would be walking around, like, basically exposing themselves. It was scandalous.
Well, there's more to it than that, though. But real quick, we should say we brought your grandmother, who lived with us for the better part of 2017, to school, and she was shocked. Steph's elderly Mexican Catholic grandmother was shocked.
Oh my gosh, my grandmother. So my grandma has fallen away from the faith, so we thought it would be a really good opportunity to bring her to Mass, because she really loved him and really wanted to see where he was, you know, where he was working and what have you. And so
thought it would be a wholesome experience.
A wholesome family outing out for Mass, as you would typically expect, not to be scandalized at Mass. So we're going, and my grandmother, who's 85 at the time, she was living with us. She was unwell, so we'd taken her into our home, and so we were really trying to bring her back into the faith while she was with us. We bring her to campus. Turns out that she really couldn't get out of the car because she was still so unwell, so she had to stay in the car and rest a little bit. It was a little bit too much for her at that point.
Also, turns out her vision, which was good to know, was still good enough to see the double bottoms afforded. She could see.
It was hilarious because we left for Mass. And I get back into the car, and my grandmother is like, Mija, the skirts. Like, she couldn't believe it. Am I exaggerating? For the next 3 days, my grandmother went on and on about how the skirts need to be longer, how she could see like certain areas of the girl she shouldn't be able to see, how, like, whatever happened to tights, whatever happened to opaque leggings,
no,
so you didn't see things.
Long jacket and short skirt, like the Cake song, and boots like Walker of the Night boots. This would be on Mass Day that people would dress up. And your grandma happened to catch that the one Mass Day of the week, Wednesdays. It was the common response, one might say the ubiquitous response of any passerby to Garces, casually or more formally, in whatever capacity. They were flat out shocked. We're not talking about slightly short skirts that went a couple, an inch above the knee or an inch above the knee. We're not that puritanical, Steph and I, with our dressing standards, not nearly as much as many traditionalists. So that for us to be saying this is a cry from heaven, or a cry from somewhere.
And I think it's a really good indicator. So, for example, like if you're looking at a new home and you're looking around to see, this is a house that I want to buy, and you see a cockroach on the wall, you're like, bad sign, abort, abort, abort. That, to me, honestly, it might sound silly, but to me, like, that is a good sign that somebody's house is in this school's house is in disarray. If they're allowing their especially in a co-ed school, they're allowing their female students to be walking around like that. And the really interesting thing is that, for a matter of fact, I know a lot of parents were bothered by this. There was actually, I believe, like at one point, several of them tried to get the school to change the policy, but here we go. And I think this will move on to number 2, that wealthy parents have a lot of say in these schools. And, the side note is a lot of these wealthy parents aren't that intelligent or don't know anything about the faith. So these are the people that are making the decisions behind the scenes. But a lot of the wealthy parents thought it was really cute that their daughters were in these little Catholic schools skirts, and thought it was like a status symbol. And so guess what? The skirts stayed.
Well, more than that, before we move on, that's a great number 2, and it's a great segue by my co-host here, Stephanie, whatever her middle name is, Gordon. And yeah, but it is important from an administrative point of view to articulate that several of the good administrators at the school, and there was kind of a civil war for the heart of Garces Memorial, a couple of the good ones had at some point attempted to heed the outcry from the theology department, actually a couple of the other departments, even the liberal teachers at school, which is another one of the
theology department and grandmothers everywhere.
And grandmothers everywhere, little Mexican grandmothers everywhere, made the right call. Even the liberals at school made the call because it was so egregious. And at one meeting, after a committee meeting, subcommittee meeting, had brought their results, what do we need to do better, to the admin, at one general meeting with all the teachers, this good administrator, she had to say, look, I'm sympathetic, but it's off the board. There's nothing I can do. No, please, no more feedback on the skirts. We know it's ridiculous, whatever. At my subcommittee meeting, last thing I'll say, and then we can move on. Literally,
tell all.
This woman, who was very smart, very shrewd, complained about the skirt length and demonstrated the a fortiori strength of her proof by showing a Halloween costume. It was October. A Halloween costume, like Spirit's Halloween store, a brochure of Halloween costumes with sleazy looking loose women's outfits, and comparing it to
a picture of one of the students in the actual uniform that they're in.
I think it was something promotional for the school too, meaning they fully sanctioned this. And it was a shorter skirt of our Catholic high school girl who represented Garces. It's a little extreme at Garces, which is strangely enough more politically conservative than most Catholic high schools, but theologically a little more out of whack. But generally speaking, by and large, could be said to be representative of the sovereign will of the money holders who run the school. And that is point number 2. The money rules the day. Money talks, and you know what walks. And that's the cynical attitude that a person who doesn't believe in principle uses to describe, to capture the vox populi, the spirit of the world. That's not supposed to be how the Catholic Church works in its diocese or in its schools.
And a lot of these families, what we found is that a lot of the faithful families that would scrounge up enough money to send their kids to these schools, they don't have as big a voice, because these are families that are barely getting by. They're not big donors to the schools. They're not the families that are getting their names on football stadiums and what have you. These are families who are literally, like, fathers are like pulling in like 2-3 jobs to be able to send their kids to what they hope and pray is a faithful education. But these families, who are the more faithful families, who probably, if the schools would actually listen to them a little bit better, or a little more, or more at all, that they would help to lead the school in a good direction. But these aren't the families that are typically being listened to. The families that are being listened to are what happened in Tim's case. The families that have a ton of money, that are donating to the school. And in Tim's case, one of those families was super liberal, a defense attorney who's, I guess, now in a position where he thinks he wants to lecture everybody on morality, is getting upset at Tim for BLM, and then the school, they're listening to their big donors.
Sure. So it's a real problem. I mean, there's no other way to say it, that the money talks in most of these Catholic schools. And we're telling you because you might be the parents of students at a Catholic school, and you think some of these areas that need tightening up might actually be sufficiently tightened at your school. Well, others of this list of 10 or 11 will certainly hit home. This one, I can guarantee you, no matter what school we're talking about, Faithful Catholic Academy or Catholic school in name only, the money talks. And it becomes a real problem because the board, which tends to be the important socioeconomic status people and parents, tends to be comprised of the most moderate, the most worldly, and the least theologically concerned parents, and the least theologically informed. This just means, as the rubber hits the road, that even at a relatively faithful place, you got to watch out for your board and the cool parents. It's unbelievable how the high school culture of cliques and stuff like that, which I actually call middle school culture, never tends to leave the parents who are hangers-on to when they peaked in high school. And they're always the one pushing short skirts, pushing a more worldly agenda, pushing the liberal theological stuff without even knowing that they're doing so.
Right. Also the same ones who brings us, I think, to our next point on the list, sports over academics. How many times in school, during a school day would you have to excuse kids out of class to go play sports? I mean, and now let me say this, I was raised in Texas, so I am not, an anti-sports person.
Both of us went to high school in Texas, all 4 years.
In Texas, any of you out there who know, Texas, we had my high school was only 11th and 12th grade. They split up the schools.
High school from senior high. Yeah,
high school and senior high. They split high school into 2 separate high schools so that they can funnel talent for football.
9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. That's how serious Texas is.
Even in a school like that, we were never allowed to miss class.
Right.
We were never allowed, just excused from class. This was another issue. I can't tell you how inconvenienced it is, or what an inconvenience it is for the teachers, especially, Tim, that he would have to redo assignments, redo tests, redo lessons, lectures, all the time because so many of the kids at the school were in sports, and the school policy was just you can miss class whenever you need to for sports.
On a sliding scale, I would say, if I had to typify, getting worse throughout the week. It's typically you'd have more there Monday, Tuesday, less Wednesday, less Thursday, way fewer on Friday. Typically on Fridays, I would have half the students in the class. I'm talking every Friday. It would be something like almost half gone, sometimes more. And it was because they were busing students during the middle of the day for meets and events during the school day, the afternoon. When I coached basketball, which should reaffirm the idea that I am not anti-sports. I was a huge basketball player in high school. Many traditionalists always accuse me of being too in love with sports as it is, blah, blah, blah. The point is, when I became high school basketball coach for Garces, I couldn't believe how many times I would have to leave during the day. I mean, it wasn't that many times, but for tournaments, it was full on, naked, unabashed. We're privileging the tournament over academics. and of obviously over the spiritual life of the school. It's no joke, and it's always a bad sign if you're leaving school during the day for sports. And again, we had better sports in Texas than in California.
Yeah.
Far better.
And what are these parents paying for? Supposedly you're sending your kid to a diocesan school for a fantastic education. Well, Tim was giving a fantastic education, but that was being constantly interrupted by the priority of sports over academics.
And watered down by the fact that makeup lessons are fine when you're legitimately sick. My parents and your parents, certainly not yours, were never the ones to rigidly send you to school when you had even a cough. My mom would be like, "That's fine, take the day off." Nevertheless, when every Friday, every Thursday, you have a third of the class gone, and it tends to be the same student population, they're not getting the same education by makeup work. You can fill in a day or two, even once a month. You miss a day, okay, that's fine. You're still getting the bulk of the lessons. It absolutely outstrips the education that one gets in the classroom to be missing that much school. And it more than anything, it shows the priority of administrations around the nation at our Catholic schools. This brings us to point number 4. It's sort of the summary idea of numbers 1, 2, and 3, that Catholic education is placed to the side, put on the back burner, any time that it comes into conflict with the monetary, sports, or moral sensibilities of the parents, particularly the wealthy ones.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially the morality issue. We were constantly having, to worry about if Tim is going to be teaching the hard truths, which everyone who knows Tim knows he just did. And that's honestly, I think, one of the main reasons he got in trouble at this particular school. Because what happened? Tim, a lot of you might be thinking, oh, well, if it's so bad, why are you there, Tim? Precisely because it's so bad. Tim really wanted to go in and to try to reshape the theology department, because at this particular school, it was a nightmare. I think some of the THEO teachers were pro-abortion beforehand. And
one of them was famous for having had an interesting job and simply recounting stories of his job as raconteur rather than theology teacher, and saying, you're going to learn more here than you'd learn in theology programs or something like that. This was what I came into when I returned to the school. I taught there before I went to Rome to work on the PhD, and then before I went to the JD program in San Diego. When I came back, I found the situation vastly worse than how I left it, and I eventually was department chairman. We should also note, as bad as all this sounds, this is in a politically conservative area, the only politically conservative area, large area, of California. So by and large, the parents at this school were Trump voters in the only real conservative enclave in California. And it gets that much worse when they're outright supporters of Marxist globalist socialists like Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden. So
these people were not getting, for the most part, again, think about this for a second. This is a very conservative area. These people on the whole aren't getting mad about Tim's, giving the message about what the faith says about gay marriage or these sorts of things, or abortion.
That's what you expect. You expect those
a small contingency of liberal Catholics who don't know anything about the faith at all, who have money, and they're sending their kids to these schools that gripe. And then what ended up happening with Tim ended up happening. One wealthy liberal parent gets upset and, starts throwing a massive tantrum. And so, it really does hamstring the faithful teachers. What are they going to do? A lot of these people, because it's, a lot of them in the department have kids, and families to provide for. They're like, what are we going to do? Am I going to lose my job by teaching hard truths, or am I going to teach hard truths and possibly lose my job? So then what do you get? You get watered down theology, because a lot of those teachers don't go the way that Tim went, which is like, screw it. I'm going to just teach the faith and last as long as I can last here, which was,
6 years the second
6
turnaround.
years, but then BLM happened and that whole thing, like, which, by the way, they should be embarrassed about because it's like everything that's happened since you got fired has been completely vindicated. Everything you said has been completely vindicated. It's been a delight to watch. I
don't know how it wasn't more widespread knowledge on June 3rd. But yeah, it's an important point that you make here, Stephanie, because as bad as it is in farming conservative valley enclave for political conservatives, Bakersfield, California. Imagine how much worse it would be for a faithful Catholic teacher in one of Los Angeles's 51 Catholic high schools, or San Francisco's dozens of high school, a few less than that, but 2-3 dozen high schools. It's that much worse. And I've had friends. One of my close friends at Garces had been a Catholic school teacher in LA. And it is that much worse. So me getting fired after 6 years, being a somewhat rabble-rousing, somewhat thorny conservative Catholic teacher, somewhat more than, I guess, what you could get away with if you more quietly, more humbly taught the truths of the faith without negotiating. I'm not saying I'm the platonic form of a faithful Catholic teacher. I'm not perfect. And I probably added some fighting words to my lessons, but I only lasted 6 years. That's a pretty good tell for how long could any conservative that holds the line last in Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego. The point makes itself. A fifth point that's rampant in all Catholic high schools I've ever heard of, that follows nicely upon these points, is the popularity of grade inflation. That was another reason that I was unpopular with the petitioners. Grades are expected to be A's no matter what work the students don't put in because they're playing sports on Thursdays and Fridays.
The emails would be crazy. It would be like, oh, Mr. Gordon, I missed like 5 classes because I had sports.
They don't even say that.
Can I sweep your classroom for an A?
They'd come in and they'd say, hey, can I do anything for extra credit? Now, this sounds like general teacher griping. Wait, hold on. This is not general teacher griping. I've taught other places. I've taught community college where the students aren't mostly that ambitious. So they'll say something toward the end of the semester about, hey, is there any possible extra credit? No, I get it. No, parents, the moneyed parents at Garces, and it's very typical at other Catholic high schools in 2020, they will send emails, like a campaign of emails to all their students' teachers and to admin, like, what's the deal? No extra credit? I find that offensive. Extra credit is ridiculous. Your extra credit is doing your assignments. What they literally mean is, my student came in and offered to wash your whiteboard, a 45-second task, to go from a D- to C+. I mean, like 18 points. Those 18 percentage points cost, I don't know, 25, 50 hours of work they didn't do throughout the year. What's the difference? To get 1 extra percentage point is hours of work. They're asking for 20, 30 percentage points for a 5-minute task or less. It's offensive. And at many Catholic schools, the admin fortifies this spurious mode of reasoning.
It is a real wake-up call because I think, like Tim said, like people might be, oh, is this like typical for high school and for college? You know, maybe in some respects, but I even remember, like, he worked at Compton Community College, and everybody knows Straight Outta Compton. Like, it's called that for a reason. I mean, it's crazy town down there. He worked at Compton Community College, and the students there were legitimately interested in learning. They weren't giving, like BS excuses like they're giving, like that he would come home and, like, be like, oh my gosh, guess how many kids asked if they could, like, go to mass extra this week for extra credit or things like that. It's just like
not an exaggeration. And also at Compton, Steph would drive me off and I'd be writing lectures. This is one of the first place I got a teaching job right out of a master's philosophy program. I was teaching Plato and Aristotle to 20, 21-year-old young men and women at Compton Community College, and I got a good show of effort. And if a student had to miss class, a lot of times, no joke, it was for a funeral for another young person, and they would say, hey, this will be the only time I miss all semester. Is it okay? They'd ask me at the beginning of the semester, or if it came up suddenly, they would ask me or email me late at night even. This notion, this erstwhile notion, I'm afraid to say, of education that you tell your teacher if you're missing and you get the work and you make it up right away is gone. And it's because
a privilege.
Right. It's something that follows upon, as a corollary, upon the idea that the money talks and the BS walks at Catholic school. And far too often it's not BS that walks, it's substance walks.
And I'll say this too, and this might bring us to a next point as well, is that a lot of this, some of the other teachers there at Tim's school, they're actually like trying alongside Tim. So there's a lot of like good people that we still love and talk to, and just really like just, we're just praying for them. But, some of them actually would write us and be like, oh my gosh, we're getting emails and stuff about this whole situation with Tim and the BLM and Garces, and people are getting mad at us, and it wasn't our fault. And so we still have a lot of friends there, but and particularly, there'd be things where, some teachers would try to really beef up the faith of the school. Like, we're going to have a Catholic faith week or a Catholic schools week or something. And, they would really want to like have like adoration at school, like real faith type things. And then another contingent of the school was just like a clown show where they'd be like, no, we're the bounce houses. Where's all like the music? Where's the fun? Where's the frivolity?
Well, this is our next specific point. There's something called Catholic Schools Week where you celebrate being a Catholic school or something. It's puerile in its inception. It's babyish to begin with, but we had two different Catholic high school campus ministers, that attempted to do meaningful activities. Actually, three good campus ministers in a row, I should say, not just two. The current one is very faithful. Mm-hmm. And they were shot down. They were shot down by literally a committee of thinkers that knew nothing about the faith, that said, oh, we need more bounce houses or like baseball pitching machines out in the quad. I mean, and I can't like say that
teacher dunk stations.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, that's cool, I guess.
If you're
but
10. Maybe
not during a Catholic faith week.
And definitely not if you're interrupting better suggestions like a daily rosary or Stations of the Cross or something like that in order to do it. There's an opportunity cost. In this case, what the opportunity cost is particularly.
Do you remember really being into bounce houses at like 17 years old?
No.
Because I don't remember that.
I mean, the kids are kind of laughing about it. The boomers making the decisions behind the scenes are like, oh, they're going to love it. This will get them excited about being Catholic. I'm like, how does throwing a pitch and thereby dunking a teacher have anything to do with the faith? By the way, if you ask a question like that, how does hitting with a pitched baseball, dunking a teacher, how does that have anything to do with Catholicism? And you're doing so as a rhetorical question to be kind of funny. These boomers on the school board and the subcommittees will give you a pseudo-theological answer off the cuff. And they're like, well, this is like taking the plunge of faith. Oh my gosh,
there'll be like a board, like a big fancy expensive board above this like dunk station that says "Taking the plunge of faith."
Right. That's life.
Sponsored by so and so's mom and dad,
or so and so's mom and dad's business. You think we kind of just pulled that out of the hat? That's what life is like. Being a serious theology teacher, I'm trying to teach the kids, the difference between Duns Scotus, the medieval theologian, and Aquinas, and Peter Abelard, and we're debating, existence and essence, and they're learning real stuff. And the students are going home, on the one hand, telling their parents this, and they're like, wow, we didn't know theology was queen of the disciplines, or leastways why it is. And then on the other hand, you have the
tomfoolery. Like Tim's teaching like philosophy in his classroom, and not but like 5 feet away. Tomfoolery is going on in the quad. It is just
utter frivolity.
And I'll say this. I'll take a little break to say this too. We've gotten so many emails from Catholic teachers in Bakersfield and all over the country and world saying, oh my goodness, what do we do? We're so afraid of losing our jobs, and what's happening to Tim happening to us, and just saying these exact same things. So really, we wanted to do this video to really point people, unless you're at like a unicorn faithful school, point people to homeschool, and also just be like, this is what it's like. We're here to support these other Catholic teachers who are faithful. We know exactly what you're going through.
If you send your kids to Catholic school, you need to ask. You need to try to get on the board. As corny and gay as that sounds, fake and lame. Yes, it's kind of a waste of time. But no, in the context of AD 2020, it's not. Because you can just oversee it and be like, look, if you have a faithful theology department, this is the next point. Theology department ends up fighting all the other departments, which tends to get the more liberal hires, if the school isn't vigilant about its hires, which only the very best schools are. So what you need to say if you go to these board meetings is the following. What does the theology department think about this? Any social, cultural, political ramification that might, like a specter, haunt the school sometime over the course of that 9 or 10-month school year should be run by a faithful representative of the theology department. They should be the consigliaries of the school, and that's rarely done at most big business diocesan Catholic
Before we get
schools.
into the vetting, can I also just make a side note in here? If you are a parent that has your kid at a Catholic school and you are a faithful parent, make a fuss. Support your teachers that are actually saying the hard truths, that are going out on a limb and doing the things that they're supposed to do at a Catholic school. They need your support. They need you writing letters, calling the administration, and making a fuss if they get in trouble or whatever for doing the right thing. You have to stand up for these teachers because we're getting emails all the time. They're like, I'm trying to teach the faith. I keep getting in trouble. I'm worried I'm going to lose my job. Please support those teachers. And the reason they're having this problem internally within school is because Catholic schools are not vetting their employees. They're not asking the right questions at interviews.
When I first returned to Garces, this was shortly after Archbishop Cordileone in Northern California had said to all of his priests and pastors and diocesan principals in Northern California, do not hire, if at all possible, non-Catholics, which was amazing. Cordileone really comes and steps up to the plate and hits them out of the park from time to time. This was one of them. I circulated that letter to all the teachers, and literally an administrator, one who I'm fond of, came in and said, Tim, are you joking? Is this real? And I said no. And I happened to, because I was prepared for this, it was essentially a chess-like setup. I had the Holy See's 5 guidelines to what Catholic education ought to be. It's a little brown book about this big. I had it on my desk, and one of the 5 points is hire only Catholics, hire only faithful Catholics, if at all possible. That's not the situation in most Catholic schools.
I mean, they should be asking questions, and we know that they're not. Like, how often do you go to Mass? Are you in good standing with the church? Do you have an irregular living situation? How many teachers are there who are living with boyfriends or whatever, homosexuals or whatever? We need to be asking those questions. Are you baptized in the faith? All these things need to be asked in an interview, and they're absolutely not doing that. And so then they hire these people, and we get into this weird infighting within the teachers where the theology department is trying to really go full steam ahead with the faith. And then we have some weird science teacher off on the side that's griping because the theology department is teaching, intolerance.
Theology.
Yeah.
More important than the Civil War that is unavoidably wrought by getting faithful teachers in the theology department and liberal secular humanists in all the other departments, which is also very typical, is the danger, the insidious, creeping danger of not having the open civil war with the other department's liberal teachers, and simply those teachers teaching lesson to lesson, day to day, their nonsense in their classes, which contradict what happens in theology. I can tell you that I experienced both in my 6 years, this latter stint at Garces. The first 2 or 3 years, it was more like this was more fun, by the way. It was more like a hot war, an open war between myself and my close friends, one of whom was Christopher Plants, in the theology department, and kind of everyone else. It was like when you're on the court and you're like, us versus, theology department versus the rest of the school. We won some converts, and some members of the faculty in other departments really became supportive of us. And we had many supporters among the students and parents that loved what we were doing. They're like, holy cow, this
I don't
is
think you ever
Catholic.
had as good of a supporter though as Chris Plants, who, by the way, would threaten to quit every single time Tim would get in trouble for teaching the faith. Like one time he just wrote an email to the department that said like there was something said at the during mass today that like anyone can receive communion or whatever. You don't have to be in good standing, or there was something along those lines. I don't know exactly what it was said, but it was basically like, come all for communion. And Tim got in trouble. And the minute Tim would get in trouble, Chris was like, I'm quitting.
Like I'm quitting. You're saying I didn't have as much support as Chris himself offered?
Yeah, I was saying there was never as much support as Chris Plants was
the dude
at school.
He puts it on the line. He's a good friend.
Yeah.
That's true blue. You know, when a man is in constant need of a good friend in this world, as Vampa says to Edmond Dantes in Count of Monte Cristo, and it's ever true, and that's part of the way that Chris and I became
what
really
is it on
close.
Fraser? You're true blue, buddy.
You're true blue, buddy. But I did experience it that first way, where it was more like a hot war, and it was more like when we were getting our lunch in the teacher's lounge, it was kind of open dislike, open contest. Then Chris left and our contingent shrunk again, and they kind of already knew what our positions were. They'd crystallized and solidified, and everyone kind of retreated us with the students that liked theology and philosophy. They got a lot of philosophy in my class. So smart students that liked what we were teaching them, and we were kind of known as the conservatives, receded. And then the liberal students who liked what they were learning in the liberal disciplines, they receded, and it wasn't as hot a war. But every once in a while, I'd be like, so what are you learning? Or every once in a while, rather, the students would volunteer. Is what we learned today. The teachers were teaching directly against our theology lesson from that morning. So it's really important to follow the Holy See's teaching on the 5 ways Catholic schools should subsist, how
and you
they
would
should
think
go.
the teachers at a diocesan school would be having meetings about how to more correctly implement the faith, not just in theology class, but in other aspects of school teaching. But you know what they were spending most of their time on? Tech training, learning how to use an iPad, learning how to integrate like all this stupid technology into the classroom, when what you need is a chalk and chalkboard, and the students need to just sit there and listen to their teachers. That's being completely eradicated.
Yeah, this brings us to the next point, which is the Common Core, the John Dewey University of Chicago socialist, globalist-inspired educational reform being pushed all throughout the 20th century. Only in the last 10 years has it come to be called Common Core. It's just a new name for an old concept, new wine in old skins. This is really, really dangerous stuff because it teaches directly against the pedagogical methods of Western civilization. And I can tell you this. Technology, as much as it's enabling us to talk as if there's anyone else in the room right now, as if 10,000 of you are listening, technology is great for what it's worth. It's worth next to nothing, or if anything, negative ramifications in the realm of pedagogy. Here's why. All it takes is chalk and a chalkboard. They get so obsessed with the technology and the technology models of education pushed by Common Core, by the secular humanists.
Because they're selling it to the parents. Look at us, we have iPads. Ooh, they're selling that to the parents. Get tuition. It's like you get an iPad with tuition. I mean, it's nonsense.
But so it brings us back to that central point that the money talks, and what's popular is the vulgar popularity of what uneducated parents who have a lot of money think and don't know what a true education is, the true, the good, the beautiful, for the human person to learn virtue. That's the whole definition of what human education is right there, what I just gave you. They don't know anything about that. They think it revolves around skills. Education is skills based, right? Like it's glorified barber school. It's like, no, this is a Western civilization education. It's the classics along with theology and philosophy and the natural philosophy or math. And then we added all these other skills based STEM ideas to education, and it's been carried away by technology. It's a technocracy, an obsession with making it easy and streamlined and fun. And real education might be fun to the mentally cultivated, but it's not easy, and it shouldn't be that streamlined. It's come in every day, and everything you learn that's new ought to be a slog, and it's not. That's
and the
because
thing is, that's interesting about this, because we were going to announce this at some point, but Tim's now in a PhD program. He's been attending class again. And the way that the kids are learning right now in these diocesan schools, from what we've seen, they wouldn't last a second in a graduate program. I'm watching how Tim's class is being run. They're literally sitting there listening to professors lecture and reading something called books. And these kids, the attention spans are so bad because of these iPads, because they want everything fast and easy and accessible and just at the tip of your finger, be able to do all of this stuff, that they don't know how to just sit and listen to a lecture, how to just sit and take in some information, take notes with a pen and paper.
And I was famous. Mr. Gordon, you're an amazing lecturer. But the administrators, the ones that liked me, which was actually most of them, that I liked, which was actually most of them, would come in and say, we know we get less complaints about you among the teachers who really like to lecture for a big portion of the class because your lecturing is good, it's well cultivated, it's popular. But we have to tell you this mainly because we're telling the boring lecturers to lecture less, so lecture less. That's education. That's why your university teacher is called a professor. Get up there and profess. This is utterly against the spirit of participatory, skills-based education, which is nonsense. This brings us to the next point, which is, I'll go back to something Gavin McInnes said to me right after I got fired. It was funny. He said, if Don Draper, a man's man, was your principal at a school and you got 150 petitions, or 150 calls, let's say, complaining about this Mr. Gordon, and Don Draper, Principal Draper, likes you, he's unplugging the phone for the day.
Should I handle this one?
You handle this one. That's
Women
the masculine
bosses,
approach.
Women bosses, women principals, a problem. It's a problem. And here's why. Because women care what other women or other people think. And so what do you think happens when a women principal, even like a tough one or whatever, is getting a ton of calls complaining because so-and-so teacher in theology department is teaching intolerance about homosexuality? What happens? Women tend to, because we have this might be news for some of these people out there, but men and women have different souls and we function very differently. And women function differently from men in the way that we deal with conflict or confrontation. And which is to say, we're not that great at it. And so, especially in a professional setting. And so when you're having like female bosses or superintendents making these sorts of like quick, rash decisions because they get some complaints, it's a problem. You need to have, one thing that men are really, really great at. You need to have, for the most part, obviously, we're going to get these comments like, well, I know a man who's bad at this or whatever.
Are there exceptions to these things? Well, no, there really aren't. People love going, are there exceptions? Sure. There actually really aren't. And if you look at the statistics of Catholic school principals versus public school principals, once again, you see Catholic schools always follow the dangerous trends instead of leading the public schools away from those dangerous trends. They are as female-led as the public schools are, maybe even more. 90% of you or more who have kids going to Catholic schools have a female principal you're interfacing with. Doesn't mean this isn't a lovely person. Doesn't mean that there aren't nice ones and grumpy ones. Of course, that spectrum exists anywhere.
But when push comes to shove, yeah, she might be great and nice and pleasant in a lot of ways, and you might like talking to her, this female principal or whatever it is. But when push comes to shove and you have a conflict or a real problem, even an inter-staff problem between two teachers, you need to have the sort of temperament a man has to handle those sorts of situations. And I think that would be another way to really tell, like, okay, how is this diocese, how is this school really functioning?
Yep.
Do we have a strong male leader in charge of this school who's not going to get so upset and flummoxed or whatever by some parents like calling in and complaining? Or
flummoxed is a funny word. Look, it's a bimodal, right? The two sacramental vocations are both patriarchies. You have an ecclesial hierarchical patriarchy, all male priesthood, and you have a familial patriarchy. Man is the head of the household. Woman is subject to to obedience to the householder, the man. So why should 95% of Catholic school principals, which are, well, they're not teaching that Christianity is the patriarchy, which it is in these two modes of both vocations, but why should the principals, the leadership of the schools, be any different? It shouldn't. One thing both causes the other thing, and one thing flows from the other thing if you examine those
And we
two
all know
principles.
this is the truth. I mean, come on. I homeschool. And I even see this in myself in my own little tiny classroom where I'll be trying to incorporate, like, let's do like these fun little crafts. And he'll come in and he'll be like, okay, but does everybody have their math done today? Are these Common Core things done? That's an adorable little like turkey that you just drew. You spent 2 hours on, but
let me ask,
did we do our Common Core?
Let me ask Maggie, what is 2 times 3? And if this is posing a challenge, then the turkeys are going to have to wait. They might have to wait till Christmas or Easter.
Women are great for our, emotionality and our femininity and our compassion and our maternal instincts or whatever you want to call it. But it's like when you need a real leader, which, let's face it, all Catholic schools need a real leader. And we actually just in general, we just need leaders everywhere in the church. But in these schools, we need a leader. It's the female principals and superintendents, boo, no.
This also holds for the faculty. It's going to be mostly female at your kid's Catholic school, less so in high school, more so in middle school, grade school. You should be looking as a tell, kind of like the mini skirts Steph mentioned at the beginning of this video, at who heads the school. You should be looking on an increasing basis for male-led schools, male principals, which is in conformity with the idea of Christianity as patriarchy, a patriarchal priesthood, a patriarchal priesthood of the household in miniature, the church in miniature. Why would principals be any different? It gives you things like short skirts, which are appalling, yet popular. This conforms to the nature of woman, to truckle, to try to be peaceable, to make the better peace.
To try to make the papers like, oh, look at this adorable school. They just had like a pie eating contest during the Catholic Faith Week. Right. Things like that. It's silly.
And this brings us to our next point. The dances at my school and other schools are appalling. The music being played. You should ask your kids' high school for a playlist of all, if they're going to play popular music at the dance, which is normal. I mean, I wouldn't expect otherwise. They're not going to be dancing to Pange Lingua, right? So you should ask for a playlist. I'd like a playlist, and I'm going to look up all the lyrics to every song because you, the school, are endorsing that song. As people know, when I still worked at Garces, I lifted weights, sometimes during the day, sometimes after the day. And during the school day, as well as after the school day with the football players, it's use of the school's PA system, use of the school's speakers, use of the school's air to transmit the sound. And I could barely even get through it. I'm a rocker from the 90s. So I'm, again, not a Puritan, but the new rap music, if you don't know, I'm not even talking gangster rap. I'm talking the new rap music is nothing but pornographic. It's pornography in motion set to bad, like EDM. That's the new rap music.
And the dances
violence would be an improvement.
With that music are even worse.
They're as pornographic as the word suggests.
It's disgusting.
So, yeah, I mean, literally, I would be sitting there benching, trying to get the bar up, and I was like, did they just say that? That's the filthiest thing I've ever heard. And they're playing it at the idiotic Catholic schools across the nation that allow it to happen. That's another one of those
dances. I would even hear it. Like when we would go to like the sports events at the school. It's like I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, those throwaway lines. Well, the whole genre is throwaway, right? Throwaway lines in rap music where every once in a while you hear it and you're like, "Oh, Nike, is that? That is the I mean, I'm not talking about wearing a short skirt and saying suggestive things. I'm saying the most explicit lines of like pornography, vocal pornography you've ever heard are now in what's called this new EDM rap. And they play it across the nation, warming up for basketball games, warming up for football games, at the dances, swim meets. It's ridiculous. And they fire me for saying Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. I guess it's because they're fully in bed with the new rap industry, which is outright pornographic. You got to see to it. And everyone out there, if your kid goes to a big mill diocesan education school, then ask at these events. Say, hey, could you give me a playlist?
I mean, even if you're just going and like peeking in the room, for
well, yeah, but you're not going to hear the music then. Just say, hey, give me a playlist.
Dance. Like I'd stick my head in, just be like, hey, just see what's going on, and then like take off if I have to.
Sure, but you're missing the textual beauty of what I'm saying. Say, hey, give me a playlist of all the popular songs that are going to be played or are on the DJ's playlist, and I'm gonna scan through the lyrics, and I'm going to come back to you, Ave Maria prep school, and I'm going to say, you endorse this line about, the 3 different sorts of human sex. All 3 of them are made reference to in many of these rap songs. It's explicit stuff, and you have to literally ask for the paper. When people started telling me that they would listen to me on the TNT or on this show, and they're making, as they go, transcripts, that made me clean up my act at least a little bit. Not that I'm saying anything bad or pornographic or even using impolite language most of the time, but it makes you tighten up your ship, and that's what needs to happen. The final 2 things are more like anecdotal, and they might not be universal. The final 2 things are mass in a gym, and we'll shoot at that in a second, and pool party during the school day. That's probably something specific to my Catholic school that I used to teach at Garces Memorial. Where should we begin?
Let me have a crack at the mass at the gym, please. Okay, so if you are in a school and they are, for example, building dance studios and having their mass in a gym, you have a problem. And, I obviously we all as traditional Catholics are going to be back and forth about like what's the most reverent liturgy and like fine tuning that.
Well, not really.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we all know like
no one's going to be fourth.
Well, I just mean like as far as like, we're debating like SSPX, FSSP, all that stuff. At least all of us can acknowledge the fact that like a mass in a gym is probably the worst possible option.
Where the foul stink of 50 years of mediocre athletic contests hangs in the air. The student body is on the bleach of the cheap brown bleachers, and you go, if you're so daring to receive the Eucharist. I very rarely would at the school masses. At the free throw line. Whenever I would walk across the gym just to make my students laugh, to mock the irreverence, I'd pretend to shoot a 3, like in the mass, because you're walking across the 3-point line. And I'd be like, it's irreverent. It was a sight
to behold, like seeing like a priest like delivering or going through mass, delivering a homily, and behind him was like a 12 by 15 banner of like all of like the volleyball girls in their little shorts, like doing cutesy poses and like
in their like panty length shorts, literally that's a real thing. And also it would be like the priest would be we'd also be giggling because the priest is like crossing back and forth over the mid-court line on the basketball court. So I'd be like, that's over and back, dude, that's a turnover. Like you can't cross back over half court with the ball once you.
And the girls again with the skirts, like the girls are sitting
on the bleachers.
Worse, remember, on the floor, Indian style in skirts.
You couldn't look at them. It is
an absolute. Like, it could be like an SNL skit. Like, right. How bad. And this is the thing. You think these high school kids are going to take the faith seriously if that's what you're peddling to them? Oh, we can have mass in a gym. Like, just pack everybody in there. Bring in Father. We'll just have mass any old place.
It's a nice synopsis of the other points because it shows at a wealthy Catholic school, which many of them are, mine was, they had tons of money. They built a new chapel in between my first stint there and the latter stint there. It was a nice little chapel. It was boomery. It was Novus Ordo-y, bad architecture, but it was nice and new, still smelled new 10 years later. And yet they built it to accommodate basically one of the 4 grades at Garces, like 150 out of 500 to 600 students in the student body. It's like, why would you do this? They could build 3 of them. They have enough money to build 5 if they wanted to. Always improving the swimming pool for water polo, always improving the football stadium, always improving the basketball stadium. But the chapel only could fit a capacity of like 150 or something like that, 200, whatever it is, at a 500 to 600 kid school. It's insane, and it just shows what the political capital demanded there.
And a lot of the students that Tim taught would actually, they still talk about this, even some ex-students, they were like, man, my faith suffered so much at that school because it was just clear. Like they were just like, okay, let's go to mass. Let's have mass in our gym. Let's get this in. Let's do this. You know, it's clear when how you do things, you know, and the way that the image that you're presenting, and it shows your priorities. It shows you what you care about and how important something is to you. If I'm having my wedding at Long John Silver's, you're not going to be
we did, but
I mean, we love
most people. Most people prefer.
It was a Friday. We had to serve fish.
Yeah.
No.
Most people don't prefer fast seafood.
My Mexican grandma, by the way, always reminds me, she would always call Long John Silver's the Silvers.
Come visit me at Garces Memorial and then buy us the Silvers on a Friday night.
The Silvers.
The great uniting of the concepts you just spoke about, the image, let's call it the image we're going to leave you with, and the priorities of the school are reflected by this horrific story I have to tell. It happened at my school, probably not at many others, but it shows at this non-politically liberal place, politically non-liberal place in conservative enclave of California, when one of the administrators was leaving toward the end of the school year. It was hot. Bakersfield's in the desert. They announced an impromptu pool party during the day.
During a school day.
At which point, students began shedding their uniforms. No lie. I mean, not to like complete nakedness. Most students had sports gear, but jumping in the pool in all manner of non-swimming attire with, if I remember correctly, if memory serves, some male teachers jumping in the pool.
Other teachers have told me this story,
girls.
And they said that they remembered.
That's how I remember it.
Faculty and not appropriately clad they're not appropriately clad to begin with, but less appropriately clad than what they're wearing at school in a pool during the school day.
That's if memory serves correctly.
Ladies and gentlemen, we rest our case.
Right. We rest our case. Something's got to be done. And this is another one of the big points when I get into a debate with any faithful Catholic, sometimes like Chris Plants, good friend who I taught for 2 years at Garces with, about negativity versus positivity and the equipoise, the face we present to the world about our bishops, who are really the guys that run the show. If you ever get one of these faithful Catholics that wants to strike a more positive note overarchingly, this is what you have to go to. Like, okay, what I like to do, and I think what makes me an effective arguer is I'll go to the areas that people aren't hitting much, right? Okay, we could talk about the liturgies are all bad. Sometimes people want to get positive, like my buddy Chris, and start giving these kind of made up reasons why the liturgies are bad. And he doesn't like it any more than me because he doesn't. But this is maybe why the bishops aren't bad. Why is the Religious Education Congress so wicked? Gay agenda out the wazoo, no pun intended, at the, LA Religious Education Congress. Well, it's because he's forced into it, the bishop. Well, why are the seminaries so bad? Well, it's because they're forced. Okay, but why are the schools, the nurseries of our future Catholic lay people, by and large, why are they filthy? Why are they sexualized? Why do they nakedly speak, no pun intended, speak of the cultural agenda? Why are they taught by so few Catholics? Why are the Catholics they're actually taught by portion, usually unfaithful? Why? Why do they usually have women leading the school? Why are the parents the ones with their foot on the gas pedal?
And partying with the student body, the parents. It's a nightmare. And
so the answer to the question, but just so we don't go on, is look at the schools, because people don't know how to respond to that argument because it's really unilateral. Just look at the way they run the schools and you will get a good conception of whether our bishops are serious about the faith or not, because these are the young people that are being sexualized.
This is what's so important. I mean, that's why, I mean, you know, all the jokes aside, all of this, it matters a lot. These are our Catholic youth. And we need them to be on fire for the faith because we have a lot of battles coming. And all this talk that all of our generation Catholics are giving now, that we're kind of like the older generation, like we're not going to support the USCCB because they're running things amok. What about the schools? You guys, do not support schools that are churning out just this filth. And if you do have your kid at one of these schools, then
Make a stink.
Make a stink.
Make a
Be
stink.
like, listen, no, I'm not going to put up with this nonsense. You have to be that parent. Because I can tell you, right? This is insider knowledge. They care what parents think a lot. It bothers them when they're hearing from the parents.
It's not just that they only listen to the liberal parents. That's not true. Only the liberal parents make a stink. Mm-hmm. This is my response to conservatives who say, we're conservatives, we don't support the cancel culture. No. That's like fighting a fight with both hands tied behind your back. The left, the secular left in particular, started the cancel culture. Now we're going to fight back. Cancel them back. Get unfaithful teachers fired. Does everyone hear me? This is the whole point. If you're not going to homeschool, if you want to do whatever you have to do during the day, fine. We really recommend homeschooling. Take my classes, listen to Steph's stuff, but fine. What you need to do is something else that most regular, nice Catholics find unpleasant. Get the unfaithful teachers at your kid's school fired. I'm talking the English departments and the science departments.
And support
Ask, what
the
are you learning?
Ones.
And support the faithful ones.
Please support the faithful
With
ones.
threats, like if you take Mr. Smith out of the theology department, if he leaves for any reason other than he won the lottery, or got some boon of fate, then I'm taking my kids out of the school because that's big money.
And then do it.
And then do it. And then do it. Yes, if you start doing this, you're going to have to back up your word, meaning you might have to homeschool. It's kind of like there's an insurance policy for liberals. What the insurance policy for conservatives in this crazy heyday of late 2020 is, I suggested the other day on the air, you need an insurance policy. If you're going to speak out at your jobs, you need a way to guarantee that you won't be fired. And or to guarantee that you'll be okay, I recommended get an insurance policy with 10 of your best friends. Say, we each pledge $200 a month to whichever among us gets fired for speaking out, which is coming. The purge is coming. So fight fire with fire. So try to purge any unfaithful Catholics at your kid's school. Look at the science departments and look at the English departments. That's where it always begins. That's where the trouble begins. Get those teachers fired. Take it from me, or else they'll spoil the whole bunch.
Take it from me, a teacher who is fired.
Take it from me. And I bullied many
people. But we're
people.
continuing the online education, which has been great.
Sure we are.
You're not gonna have no whiny, liberal, miserable parents who have unhappy home lives, complaining there.
TimothyJGordon.com. You can go and click enroll or donate if you just want to skip the education and give us the dollars anyway. We're happy to do that. But go to enroll. The main two classes begin tomorrow, Aristotle's Ethics and Church History. Also, by way of announcement, when we were talking about the female principles, I was thinking of your book.
Oh.
Can you say a word about this?
Yeah,
it should be out in early 2021. Many people write me about it, so I'd like you to say a word,
I guess
please.
in typical fashion, like going from the whole BLM fired thing into my book, our family has a special penchant for, I guess, offending people. So my book, Ask Your Husband, will be coming out soon. I'm halfway done right now, and it's basically just a guidebook for authentically feminine and Catholic wives, and it's fiery. So I'm really excited about it and saying some pretty controversial things, as we Gordons like to do.
I was reading chapter 2 the other day. It's going to be dynamite.
I have a chapter in there right now. I think it's Don't Be a Nag. I'm working on right now. So that one will I'm sure win me a lot of
You
friends.
got references to, it's not just anecdotes, you got references to the Catholic teaching or Aristotle or
it's
Thomas,
not just
but
like
lots of good stories.
It's not just like a woman's like opinings on certain matters. It's, I'm asking him, a lot of help with the philosophy, theology. It's not going to be as like intellectually hefty as their feminism book, which, by the way, guys, is coming. They're just on the
early
last
2021 also
right now, but that's going to be like a meat. Their feminism book is like a real meaty book. It's got like hundreds and hundreds of references. Mine's going to have some.
Text.
It's going to be kind of an accompany piece to that, just speaking more towards the ladies and the men who love them.
A good read for the men as well. I was reading her second chapter. It's dynamite. So that'll be on Tan Books in early 2021. Me and Dave's book, No Christian Feminism, will be on Sophia Institute Press in early 2021, and they will literally come out like as companion pieces.
Punch.
A 1-2 punch for the men and the women. Please, as always, see to our Patreon account, because I am in this doctoral program. I'm not saying where, because I'm liable to be doxxed. I want to save the program director and his inbox the trouble of people saying
man,
get
so
rid
he
of
probably
Tim.
won't get rid of you like what
hopefully
happened before.
hopefully I'm not saying where, all the same. It's a belt and suspenders approach, but I'm happy to be back in doctoral courses. I'm teaching my own on Tuesday and Thursday nights, so the patrons have been extra of a blessing to our family.
And can I just say thank you so much to everyone out there who helped us get through those hard months. And I want to let everyone know we have private insurance for Abby and our whole family, and she's getting her medications, and she's doing great. She hasn't had one seizure since she had that massive hemispherectomy on the 6th of April. Not one seizure. She just loves Mississippi. She's doing great. So everyone's doing very well for now. And we really appreciate everyone's, financial help and prayers that we've gotten and letters of support. It's just been really great. So
craziest
so
summer ever for so many reasons, microscopically, macroscopically. But we're here in Mississippi, and we are ready to keep writing explosive, insulting books. Please do subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you get notifications on YouTube. God bless you all. We'll be back on Friday, or at least I will.
I'll be
making me a
homeschooling all of our
sandwich.
kids, cleaning the house.
Peace.
Bye.